Hello, folks, and welcome to Hash It Out. My name is Justin Moorhead. This is Mitch Evans. We'll be talking with you today. Hash It Out, the whole idea behind Hash It Out is that we want to talk a little bit more in depth about the passage that was most recently preached here at Woodlawn. So today that passage is Philippians chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. If you haven't already listened to the sermon, we'd encourage you to do that. We don't plan to retrace every comment or every step of the sermon here today. So if you've watched that sermon or if you had a chance to listen to it in person this past Sunday, that would probably be a really helpful starting point. Beyond that, just to read the passage and be familiar with it, the idea of what was preached and what we're going to get at today is, I guess, conflict resolution in a sense. Would you categorize it differently?
Maybe. I think that it could be, it's not all conflicts. I think that's a big thing. So it's a facet of conflict resolution. When there's genuine disagreement, as opposed to like, I cut you down to size and now I need to apologize type.
Yes. Okay. Genuine disagreement in particular within the life of a church. Because the church Paul's writing to, these two ladies, Euodia and Syntyche, are not getting along. And so that's kind of the nature of what we're addressing, is genuine disagreement within the church. Is that fair?
Yes. Because of the covenant relationship.
Yes. Good. So this is what I want to start with, is in verse 5 of chapter 4. I'll just look at it real quick. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. So the idea that what should be known about us with regard to these types of disagreements and when those things come up is that we're particularly reasonable. And that would be, I think the phrase used in the sermon was, we'd be famous for it. So are we famous for being reasonable? On the one hand, I think we could understand what that would mean. On the other hand, if there's a genuine disagreement, how do you understand this so as to not be a perpetual doormat? You know, that you're just kind of giving into the other side all the time.
Yes, I think that you could be in that spot of being a perpetual doormat. There's probably a few things that would guard against it. I think in this particular instance, neither one is in danger. Neither of these ladies was in danger. They were kind of butting heads.
Okay.
So I do think what you're saying about, am I going to be reasonable? I think possibly the further expansion of the term reasonable. So other translations, English like New American Standard, otherwise, don't use the word reasonable. They use the word gentle. Let your gentleness be favorable. So I'm going to handle a situation in a way that has a lot of concern for the other person. But I don't think, kind of by definition, it's somewhere in between reasonable and gentle, or a conglomeration of the two is a right approach, I think. So your reasonableness does not necessitate I should just perpetually give in to you. And especially in light of the broader sense of the passage. So my spot where I'm going to get real reasonable is if I am able to see there's a spot at which I could agree more faithfully with Jesus. Okay. So you might say it this way. When it comes to Jesus, I'm a doormat.
Yes.
If he says it, he gets to just walk right over anything else I've got going on. When it comes to anyone else, I'm going to be gentle towards them.
Okay.
But I'm not going to be a doormat.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And I think even in the sermon talking about it's what Jesus would have to say about the matter that's going to be most consequential, or the kind of buck stops here factor in the disagreement.
Yes.
As we're in coming together to try to fix this thing, seeking out ultimately what does Jesus say. What I think was really helpful was recognizing a lot of people have a lot of different interpretations of what Jesus said. So two people can look at one passage of scripture and come away with two different meanings for sure. To that, your recommendation is that a third party be involved, essentially.
Yes.
Maybe, I think for a lot, that makes a lot of logical sense. But how do that seems like a pretty important role if you're in a disagreement with a brother and sister in the church and you're wanting to work this thing out, wanting to honor Christ with how you resolve this disagreement. That's a pretty big key role to play if you're the objective third party coming in just to say, this is what I think the Bible is saying. How would we go about picking that person well?
Yeah, I think, I'll back up just slightly. So I think what Paul is doing is he's following the model set forward by Jesus. So Jesus says, if you have a disagreement, go one-on-one. If there's sin involved, you should acknowledge that. You should go one-on-one. So I think the pattern would follow. These ladies don't seem to have a sin issue at the heart of their disagreement, because Paul doesn't bring that up like he does elsewhere. It seems to be that they have differing views on how ministry should be done, which you might say Paul is attuned to, because Paul and Barnabas had differing views on whether Mark should be incorporated in ministry. So I think there are times where we're not necessarily orienting our disagreement around a sin issue. You lied about me and you need to own up to that.
Right.
It's truly just varying degrees of disagreement. So who you have involved in that particular instance, I think, would mirror Matthew 18. So he first says, go to each other one-on-one. Then he says, involve 2 or 3 others. In that instance, it is sin-oriented in Matthew 18, and it's saying to establish this on 2 or 3 witnesses like we see in the Old Testament. Paul is following the same paradigm, but he is not focused on sin as much as disagreement. And so I think his caveat is helpful, as we made reference to the yoke fellow. So it's somebody who is yoked with Christ, yoked with the gospel ministry. So I'm looking around my life for somebody else who is a particularly godly person who's putting what Jesus said first, and they have a lot of wisdom in identifying not only how to be at peace, but I want to identify what Jesus would require, because in the end, my hope is that myself and whoever I have a disagreement with, that we don't see one of the 2 of us prevail. We see Jesus prevail.
Okay.
So who's going to be really thoughtful on following Christ and what that looks like, who could analyze our situation, see where we've misstepped and how we might better line up with Jesus. And then I think that dovetails nicely with the reasonableness, is that if you can show me a way this lines up with Jesus, I'm going to follow that recommendation, and I'm going to do so very easily. I'm going to be easy to get into that spot. So I may not have answered it in totality, but I think that it is looking for somebody who lines up well with what are Jesus's purposes. They look yoked to the gospel ministry, yoked to following Christ.
I think that's a very helpful answer. Even to think like I don't necessarily need to look for my right-hand man to be this objective third party. I need to truly want, but all this probably goes back to the heart issue. Do I want to win this disagreement, just for lack of a better way to put it, or do I want Jesus to win out in this disagreement? So to look for somebody who is kind of known for wanting Jesus to win out in their life, and then to bring that person in, but even to paint the picture of it in a way that's maybe helpful. So if you're listening, if you can imagine, you're dug in at a disagreement spot, whether it's theological or philosophy of ministry or whatever, there's a dug in disagreement, and there's a person, the Bible is said to have corrected you, and then another godly person comes along and affirms, I do think that that's what the Bible is getting at, that you would be in the position of needing to change, that we, in that moment, should be quick to want to come around and change.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Lord willing, we're real quick. And sometimes those people are going to notice pieces of the argument that should be apologized for. Sometimes they're going to even notice this is an insignificant issue, and really it's your pride that's gotten involved, and there's not a whole lot of agreeing or figuring out what Jesus would say. It's, as we've talked many times, Proverbs 19:11, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's the glory of a man to overlook an offense. So really, yes, we got kind of in this back and forth, but it would behoove me to step back from it and say, really, is there something that we're genuinely disagreeing over, or is it maybe more oriented towards my pride, and I just don't like the way you approached me, and you should have had a different tone, all these sort of things. So I think somebody else being involved can cut through that so easily.
Yes.
That it's helpful. The peculiar thing is the reluctance to get a third party involved. So people will sit in the room, like I think these 2 ladies were doing, for years, in our instance, maybe not years in theirs, for a prolonged period of time, frustrated with each other and certain that they're right.
Right.
And they never involve another godly person who can maybe speak into the situation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I think that even the fact that they would be in the same room, or what we would maybe say, the fact that they're church members together and that they have this covenant relationship, that you're just not some other person, much less you're not even just some other Christian person, but you're a Christian person that I'm in church with, that I belong to a church together with you, puts us in a particular position to really need to want to work that out, to not be content with just sitting on opposite sides of the church every Sunday because we've got this grudge that we can't even really remember what it was over, for not involving somebody else. So, I mean, I think that covenant relationship is really what motivates us to want to resolve it well, to want to see Jesus honored in it really well. Do you think that there are parallels, or maybe if there are, what do you think they might be, to the way we would address disagreement in the church relationship versus another covenant relationship like marriage? So would there be parallel for how you would prescribe a married couple approach conflict resolution based on the covenant nature of their relationship?
Yeah, I think you can work it backward and forward. So in terms of married couple, we can learn something from that we would apply back to the church. Yes, I think what makes this where they should work to a point of agreement is the fact that they're in a covenant relationship. Mm-hmm. So it is not like Romans describes. Romans describes that the church, plural, should live at peace with all people as much as it depends upon us. Many times I've heard that as a motivation for why a married couple might live life very separately. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to keep the peace, right? And I want to keep the peace. As much as it depends upon me, I want to keep the peace.
Right.
Is not a right response in a marriage relationship. Because it's a covenant, you should say, we need to agree upon what Jesus says to do. So just kind of having our own lives living separately is not faithful to our covenant relationship, nor is it faithful to Christ. So I don't have the luxury of just saying, well, I think as long as we go along to get along, that would be fine.
Sure.
I think very similarly in church, the organization of it, typically being greater than two people, like a marriage covenant, would make it easier to kind of keep your distance and that sort of thing in many churches with opportunities just to float in and kind of keep a little bit of anonymity, or at least keep my distance and think that I have solved it, that I've done a godly thing. So I think what this is doing is saying it's forcing us beyond, in particular, it's forcing us beyond compromise. So a compromise says, I want a little bit of my solution and a little bit of your solution. Mm-hmm. Then we're getting, at best, if it's partially Jesus' solution and partially what we want, there's some fraction in there. It's half mine, half Jesus's. So compromise is actually illegitimate. Compromise would not be a right thing to do when it comes to something Jesus has clearly stated. So if Jesus has stated it, that gets 100% of compliance. I don't get to interject something in which I think you should give. So I think it would rule that out. So if we jump from the church back to married couples, I would say very similarly, that is the predominant advice, that you need to learn to compromise. There are many ways in which compromise makes a ton of sense. But what we're perpetually asking is, am I compromising what Jesus has told us to do? That's where I don't compromise. If he's told us something to do, I'm all in on that. I'm easy to get all in on that. And I don't think some kind of middle ground is more faithful. That would put me half Jesus, half something else. So a halfway measure for the sake of seemingly keeping the peace in a compromise would actually go against what Paul's saying. So he doesn't say, try to come together. He says, agree in the Lord.
Yes. Oh, and I think even as we're talking and I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking if you're in a dug-in position in a disagreement, typically, and I'll even say for me, typically it's not in that moment when I envision that disagreement, I'm not involving Jesus in it. It's just me and this other person. So I think to be actively involving Jesus in those moments is probably the key to this whole thing. Because, I mean, really, to be thoughtful that this disagreement, especially in a covenant relationship, be it marriage or in the church, always involves Jesus. If you're a Christian, everything involves Jesus. So to be wanting to approach it that way and not say, I want my position to have the best light and get the best look, the best hearing, but really I want Jesus's position to get the best hearing. Altogether, I think a lot of times doesn't even enter into the mix.
Oh, I agree. And I think the other thing doesn't enter into the mix in marriage relationships is the third party often enough. So many times, the only time third party enters in is we are at the brink of divorce and we're finally willing to go to counseling to say we checked that box before we split. To realize this is prescribed well before that.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
Right? These two ladies that have loved Jesus, need to work together, somebody should come alongside of them. So for a married couple to more consistently say, whose input? Maybe there's a wise pastor. We could get him to speak into this situation, a family member, something. Somebody who's really yoked to Jesus could come alongside of us, because when it comes to how we discipline our kids, we've been at this stalemate. We both have strong opinions about it, but we don't want to just come up with some compromise. We want to do what Jesus says.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's great. So, yeah, I guess with that, if you're listening, Christian, whether a Woodlawn member or otherwise, if there's a disagreement that you can envision that's currently going on in your life, I think to involve Christ in that process, to think about what would represent him best, and to, in wisdom, bring somebody else, a godly, trusted person, to kind of help speak to it would be great, and we hope that you would. But that's what we've got for you today. So next week, we'll be back here, same bat time, same bat channel. Hopefully you can check in and catch us then on Hash It Out. See you then.